Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, July 8, 2025. President Donald Trump holds a cabinet meeting at the White House, runs 1 hour and 45 minutes, during which he said the new August 1st date when tariff levels he's imposing on other countries are to take effect will not be extended. Compared the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to the Saturday Night Live character, the Pathological Liar, after Senator Schumer called for an investigation into whether National Weather Service budget cuts impacted forecasting and warnings in the deadly Central Texas floods. Confirmed defensive weapons will be sent to Ukraine to help defend against Russia's latest air attacks. Said he will meet again with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to try to advance a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza, and called a reporter's question about Jeffrey Epstein a waste of time and a desecration when there are so many other important issues to discuss. The Senate has 2 weeks to pass a nearly $10 billion rescissions package, canceling funding for global health and foreign aid programs and public broadcasting, or the bill will die. We'll talk about it with Axios Senate reporter Stephen Newcomb. TSA no longer requiring air travelers to remove their shoes for security screenings. A news conference today at Reagan Airport with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins announces a plan to counter Chinese company purchases of U.S. farmland. And the State Department asked about a person using artificial intelligence to pose as Secretary of State Marco Rubio and contact foreign ministers. AFP writes that President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he would not extend an August 1st deadline for higher U.S. tariffs to take effect on dozens of economies, a day after he appeared to signal flexibility on the date. While Trump imposed a sweeping 10% tariff on goods from almost all trading partners in April, higher rates customized to dozens of economies were unveiled, then halted until July 9th. The president this week again delayed their reimposition, pushing it back to August 1st. Trump insisted that there would be no further delay in these steeper tariffs. He added that the levies would start being paid on August 1st, in line with letters now being sent out to trading partners. No extensions will be granted, he posted on Truth Social. There'll be no change. On Monday night, Trump had told reporters at a dinner that the August 1st deadline was firm, but not 100% firm. Pressed on whether the letters marked his final offers, Trump replied, "I would say final, but if they call with a different offer and I like it, then we'll do it." That was from the AFP article. Here's President Trump at today's White House cabinet meeting.
Mr. President, on the tariffs first, you've said it is the deadline. What incentives do countries have to negotiate? It seems that deadline keeps moving. It was April 2nd, now it's...
We didn't move, no. It's always been August 1st, that's what we're paying. A statement was put out today, and I put it out just to make it clear. It wasn't a change, it was August 1st. We don't change very much. You know, every time we put out a statement, they say he made a change. I didn't make a change. A clarification, maybe. No, August 1st they pay. And everybody pays, everybody has to pay, and the incentive is that they have the right to deal in the United States. If they don't want to, they don't have to pay, and they don't have to deal here. But if they want to buy and make a lot of money and sell in the United States, they have to do that.
President Trump at the cabinet meeting at the White House. Back to the AFP article. In a push for further trade deals, Trump sent letters to more than a dozen partners on Monday, including key U.S. allies Japan and South Korea. Products from both countries would be hit with 25% duties, Trump wrote in near-identical documents to leaders in Tokyo and Seoul. Indonesia, Bangladesh, Thailand, South Africa, and Malaysia were among other countries facing duties ranging from 25% to 40%. Most countries receiving the letters so far saw U.S. tariffs at similar or unchanged rates from those threatened in April, although some, like Laos and Cambodia, received notably lower levels. Trump said Tuesday that Washington was probably 2 days off from sending the European Union a letter setting out the updated tariff rate that the bloc would face, again from AFP. Back to the cabinet meeting, President Trump asked whether more trade deals can be expected.
And with the flurry of deals, will we hear in the next 24 hours, will we hear a flurry of deals?
Yeah, we have a lot of them going out. But the deals are mostly my deal to them. We're picking a number that's low. We don't want to hurt them. And fair. We're picking a number that's lower than, in most cases, lower than what they charged us. But it's amazing when you've paid all this money for years and they get one president that's a little bit different and a little tougher on this subject, and they're willing to drop everything they've been charging us for years and years. I mean, we have countries going, we will have you don't have to pay any tariff to come in and do business. They're giving us total access to their countries. They gave us no access to the country. They say, well, you cannot go into our country. Okay, good. Now it's, we will give you total access and you don't have to pay any tariffs. But please don't charge us tariffs. And we don't like that deal. So the letters I send out are, we have made some deals. We can make a lot more deals. It's just too time consuming. It just makes it more complicated. And we can do things over the years too. You know, we're not hard line. But it's about time the United States of America started collecting money from countries that were ripping us off and laughing behind our back at how stupid we were.
President Trump at the cabinet meeting. So far, Trump administration has announced trade agreements with the United Kingdom, Vietnam, and China. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, also at this meeting, said that tariff income could be more than $300 billion by the end of the year. Wall Street today, the Dow down 165, NASDAQ up 5, S&P down 4. And now to the Central Texas floods. USA Today writes that search and rescue operations in Central Texas entered their fifth day Tuesday after heavy rainfall overwhelmed the Guadalupe River, sending floodwaters roaring through homes and summer camps and killing over 100 people. The death toll stood at 109, including at least 27 children and counselors from the beloved Camp Mystic, a storied Christian girls' camp in Kerr County, where flooding hit the hardest beginning July 4th. At least 30 children were among those killed in the county. Sheriff Larry Latha said in an update Tuesday morning, 5 Mystic campers and 1 counselor remain unaccounted for, said Latha. The last live rescue was made on Friday, said Jonathan Lamb with the Kerrville Police Department. That was from USA Today. President Donald Trump got an update today at the White House cabinet meeting from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on the federal response to the Texas floods, and said he would be traveling to Texas on Friday.
The response has been incredible, and the fact that we got along so well, I don't know, I don't even think that's a political thing, but we got along so well, and it was so unified. I think a lot of lives have been saved. That could have been as bad as it was, and you could have lost double or triple. This thing was just really horrible. Well, congratulations on a great job, and I appreciate it. I know you're going down. I'll be going down on Friday with First Lady, who would be taking a trip, and we don't want to get in anyone's way because that's what happens. The president goes and everyone's around focused on. I don't want anyone to focus on us, but it's possible they could have somebody saved still. You know, there's a lot of areas. It's a big area, and probably unlikely at this point, but there could be. I mean, they're thinking there could be the possibility, but what a tragic situation. A good job, and we'll see you on Friday, and we'll finish out the day here.
President Donald Trump at the cabinet meeting at the White House. He later answered questions from reporters about the Texas flood response. This came from Brian Glenn, chief White House correspondent for Real America's Voice.
Yes, Mr. President, I've got a quick comments and feedback as a native Texan, someone that I grew up bringing my kids to a camp very near the affected camp now. Thank you on behalf of Texas. I've gotten hundreds of messages that want to thank. So if you're in the cabinet room, you can tell the president and his team on behalf of Texans, thank you so much for the quick response and the loving and the hugs. I saw that you gave. Two quick questions.
I saw a Palestinian senator. His name is Schumer. He's a good Palestinian. No, he's a Palestinian. He's become a Palestinian. He's abandoned the Jews. But I saw him say, it's Trump's fault. Yeah, that's right. It's Trump's fault. He was actually, do you ever see John Lovett's The Liar? Where he goes, yeah, I went to Harvard. That's right. This was Schumer. He goes, yeah, it's Trump's fault. That's right, it's Trump. I actually saw that stupid guy try and blame it on me, and I said, man, that's a tough one to take. But his career is limited because I hear AOC is going to beat him, and she's no bargain either, by the way.
President Trump at the cabinet meeting at the White House. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, on Monday sent a letter to the Commerce Department Inspector General calling for an investigation into whether the Trump administration's cuts to the National Weather Service affected the agency's response to the deadly flooding in central Texas. Senator Schumer spoke about it today on the Senate floor.
Today, the Senate's thoughts and prayers are with all of the victims, families, communities devastated by the flash floods in Texas. The reports from Texas were both heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. Water rising over 25 feet in a matter of minutes. Entire buildings and homes swept away. Hundreds of people stranded. As of this morning, 105 people have died during the floods, 27 children. To see the pictures of those children, the little beautiful faces, which I saw published in one of our New York papers this morning, just breaks your heart and stays with you. And the agony, of course, of those in their families who survived. Of course, the search continues for many more, and we hope and pray more will be found alive. I thank all of the first responders on the ground, and we all hope for the best in the ongoing rescue and recovery efforts. Now, when a tragedy as devastating as the one in Texas occurs, the American people deserve to know what happened, what more could have been done to minimize the tragedy, and what we can do better to prevent this from happening again. And that means taking a close look at what went wrong, if anything, at the agency level. So yesterday I asked for an investigation into what role, if any, the administration's staff cuts to local National Weather Service stations played in preparedness and response to the Texas tragedy. We also must look forward. As communities rebuild, as families mourn, we must ensure the federal government has all the resources in place to aid those in need. And that means holding off against devastating cuts to agencies like FEMA. As recently as last month, Donald Trump talked about, quote, weaning off FEMA, and has toyed with eliminating the agency entirely as soon as this year. That has been a mistake. That would be a mistake at any time. But in light of these horrible floods, it's unthinkable that Donald Trump would do something like put FEMA's future in doubt. As communities rebuild, today would be a good day for Donald Trump to back away from his threats to dismantle FEMA.
The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor in Washington. And this is Washington today. Story from CNN as Central Texas reels from flash floods that killed over 100 people this weekend. Questions are sharpening about whether officials could have done more to avert the tragedy, both in the decades leading up to the disaster and in the moments after the Guadalupe River began cresting its banks. That was from CNN. Kirk County, Texas Sheriff Larry Latha and Lieutenant Colonel Ben Baker, Deputy Director of Law Enforcement, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, were asked about this at the Daily Flood Response News Conference in Kerrville, Texas.
I would like to know if you could outline, please, what the specific actions and discussions were that local officials took between 1:14 a.m., that's when the first flood emergency alert came out, and hours later when the river first started flooding. What happened in those hours?
What I can tell you, when I was first notified, it was around the 4 to 5 area. One of my sergeants was in dispatch when the first calls started coming in, the actual 911 calls come in. It was between 4 and 5 when I got notified. Okay, but prior to that, in that 3 to 4 area, my understanding is, and we're in the process of trying to put a timeline. You know, that's going to take a little bit of time. As I've told you several times, that is not my priority this time. There's 3 priorities. That's locating the people out there, identifying and notifying the next of kin. That is what I'm taking as my job as sheriff here to do. Okay.
With all due respect, sir, I think that the community here is asking these questions. What happened? When did it happen? Was the emergency manager awake at the time? Did they push the button to issue an emergency alert?
Sir, it's not that easy. You just push a button, okay? There's a lot more to that. And we've told you several times.
So did it happen, sir?
I can't tell you at this time. Okay.
You can't tell me if the emergency manager of the county actually issued an emergency alert.
Okay. Sheriff, who
Shimon, just give me a second.
Emergency Operations Center? Who runs the emergency?
I'll come back to you. I ain't going nowhere.
Appreciate it.
Who runs the Emergency Operations Center?
We have a communication center, a dispatch, okay? We have a communication center. That's where the calls actually go to the police department, then they're forwarded to us.
But leading up to this, in monitoring the weather, there's, in any large city, in any state, there's an Office of Emergency Management that is monitoring the weather, that is watching and listening and getting briefings. Who was getting those briefings in this city, in this county? Who was receiving that information, and who would have ultimately made the decision to evacuate, hearing what was coming in from the Weather Service and other.
Okay, what we would have done when we get notified, okay, I'm going to tell you that.
You're not emergency management, though, right? The sheriff's not EOC.
No, there is no, I meant as the city. Yeah, help me with that.
So we understand you have many questions.
Right.
Hang on.
No, I understand, but you're not gonna answer the question because that's up to the city manager and the mayor to answer those
Correct.
questions.
County emergency.
We understand you have many questions.
The judge is not here.
We understand that, but right now, this team up here is focused on bringing people home. That's our focus. All those questions will be answered, but the priority right now
It seems like you're done.
is bringing people home.
We totally understand that, and we value the incredible work that is being done by those first responders. We're seeing them out there muddy and sweaty and grinding it out day after day. But your community is asking these questions.
And we will get answers. Right now, all of our resources are focused to recovery.
Who was in charge of the emergency operations center at the time that was getting any briefing?
Do we have another question?
Lieutenant Colonel Ben Baker, Deputy Director of Law Enforcement, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Kerr County, Texas Sheriff Larry Latha at a morning news conference today in Kerrville, Texas. Dallas Express writes that Governor Greg Abbott has activated more than 1,750 personnel, 975 vehicles, and over 20 state agencies in response to ongoing flooding and severe weather across central Texas, the Hill Country, Big Country, and Concho Valley regions. The Texas State Operations Center remains at Level 2 escalated response, and additional state resources have been deployed as forecasts show continued heavy rainfall capable of triggering flash floods throughout the week. That was from the Dallas Express. Governor Abbott toured the flood-damaged area and held a news conference himself this afternoon in Kerrville.
We know a special session's coming in about 10 days. That's where I would say where it begins. Candidly, those investigations will begin by both the House and Senate before we go into session. So probably beginning later this week or the early part of next week, there'll be committees formed that are already kind of working on ideas about ways to address this. Second part of the question needs to be addressed. You ask, and I'm going to use your words, who's to blame? Know this. That's the word choice of losers. Let me explain one thing about Texas, and that is Texas, every square inch of our state cares about football. You could be in Hunt, Texas, Huntsville, Texas, Houston, Texas, any size community, they care about football. High school, Friday night lights, college football, or pro. And know this, every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The championship teams are the ones that say, don't worry about it, man, we got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, that we're going to win this game. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions. What Texas is all about is solutions. In fact, I want to read you something that I received last night that's worth emphasizing to put this in context. Tragedy has come. That part is done. What we do now, who we are now, that's what the story is still being written. Let it be one of grace, of grit, of fierce love in the face of grief. Let it be the kind of story that proves that the Hill Country may flood, but it does not fail. Say what you will about Texas, but when the rivers rise, so do we. Not with blame, not with bitterness, but with boots on the ground, arms around strangers, and hearts wide open. That's the Texas I know, and that's the America that I believe in. What this person wrote is what I know is true for all Texans, and what we will achieve every single day.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, in Kerrville, Texas today at a news conference with state and local officials. Associated Press writing about it. More than 160 people are believed to be missing in Texas in the aftermath of the flash floods that killed more than 100 over the July 4th weekend, Governor Greg Abbott said Tuesday. Abbott said many of those who are not accounted for were staying in the state's hill country but did not register at a camp or hotel. He spoke at a news conference after taking a helicopter tour of the affected area. AP notes that Abbott said President Donald Trump has pledged to provide whatever relief Texas needs to recover from the flooding. That was from Associated Press. This is Washington Today. In Washington, D.C., the U.S. House is out for the week. The Senate is in for legislative business, and that includes a procedural vote today on an energy undersecretary nomination and later this week on the Federal Aviation Administration administrator nomination. There will also likely be discussions off the floor about the $9.4 billion rescissions package the president sent to Congress that cancels $8.3 billion in foreign aid and global health programs and $1.1 billion for publicly funded media, PBS and NPR. It passed the House a couple of weeks ago. 214 to 212 was the vote, and the deadline for it to pass the House and Senate in the same form and be signed into law by the president is July 18th. But some Republican senators have concerns. Senator Mike Round, Republican of South Dakota, was interviewed today by Anna Palmer, Punchbowl News co-founder and CEO.
Looking forward, the rescissions package the White House has brought forward, the Senate is supposed to look at it. It has until the end of next week to pass it. You've been skeptical, I would say, on some of the changes, right? The cuts to PBS, for instance. Will you support it or no?
We're going to start out. The OMB has told us that they will work with us. We're going to find out. Okay. It's more than just me that are concerned about. Here's the deal. In South Dakota, I've got 9 tribes, 9 Native American tribes. They're in some of the most rural parts of the entire country. North Dakota's got the same thing. Montana's got the same kind of stuff. Alaska's got it. I think there's over a dozen different members that have got concerns about rural public radio stations that serve very, very poor areas. 99% of their income comes, or 90, no, let me make it, I know at least 90% of their income comes in from this particular part of the budget. It's gone. It'll shut these places down. You know, look, terrible things happen in Texas. I mean, our thoughts and our prayers go out to these families that have lost these loved ones. They're talking about emergency services there and how do you communicate. For these rural communities, these radio stations are the only way that they can communicate with one another. This takes out 90%. They will shut down. And so we want to make sure that the money that's going to those is still there. They provide a real service, and they're not political in nature. They're providing community service. So for those people that are angry about the politics of some of the public broadcasting and so forth, this has nothing to do with that. This is providing a service in rural areas, and we've got to be able to protect it.
Senator Mike Rounds, Republican from South Dakota, at a Punchbowl News interview today. Stephen Newcomb, Axios Senate reporter, writes at Axios.com that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, is bracing Democrats for a government funding fight, foreshadowing grave implications if Republicans pass President Trump's $9.4 billion rescissions package. Stephen Newcomb joins us now by phone. Thank you for being with us. What is Senator Schumer warning about?
Well, that's what everybody on the Hill sort of wants to figure out, right? One, the really important thing to keep in mind here is right after this rescissions package, the next, sort of big to-do item on their to-do list is a government funding deadline at the end of September. And it seems clear if you read between the lines that Schumer is alluding to the fact that if Republicans choose to pass this rescissions package along party lines, via party lines, that there may be some consequences for Republicans in the appropriations process and when they try to reach that deadline at the end of September.
So we're talking about the possibility of a government shutdown.
That is what we're talking about.
The rescissions package passed by a single vote in the House. We're hearing some rumblings of dissatisfaction among some Senate Republicans. What are we looking for in the next week as they consider this?
Yeah, I think the big one to watch is Senator Susan Collins, who is the chairwoman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which this bill has to go through before reaching the Senate floor. At least if they did it via regular order, it would have to go through. So she has voiced concerns about the bill, about the package a few weeks ago in the lead up to the House vote, and since the House passed the package last month. So she's the biggest domino to fall, whether she supports it, whether she tries to, get some changes to the bill that would be amenable to her. But again, this thing only needs a party line vote, so they can lose Susan Collins and 2 others and still get the rescissions package through the Senate. And that's the goal for Senate Republican leadership.
Did Senator Collins say specifically what funding she doesn't want to see cut?
Yeah, I think there are some I think that it runs a gamut of a lot of concerns. I mean, the rescissions package pulls back funding for a lot of foreign programs to fight diseases. There are also some domestic programs that it cuts. And hope, our hope is to understand her concerns a little bit more precisely and clearly once this thing gets a markup, if it gets a markup in the Senate Appropriations Committee.
We're talking with Stephen Newcomb from Axios. What is the timeline in the Senate when it comes to the rescissions package?
Yeah, so Senate Republican leadership has signaled that it's unlikely to come to the floor this week, which really leaves just next week for them to get this done, because the rules are this rescissions package 45 days after it's been sent from the White House, it sort of expires. And so that expiration date is July 18th. So they have to get this thing through the Senate by July 18th. That gives them a window of this week and next week. And like I said, leadership has signaled it won't be this week. So you're really looking at negotiations this week, with Collins and some other Republicans, and then the week after next week is where the rubber meets the road on whether they're actually going to be able to get this thing done.
And if the Senate makes changes, it would have to go back to the House.
That's right, and that's the sort of the truncated timeline that we're working with right now, and the House is on vacation this week. So even if they were to act on it this week, they wouldn't have a counterpart to send it back to. So, coming down to a deadline is always tricky, and it'll be up to John Thune to try to accomplish that, and possibly Mike Johnson as well.
2 more questions. If this rescissions package makes it through and signed into law and the money is revoked, has the Trump administration indicated it's looking to do more rescissions bills?
I think that the White House has signaled an openness to doing this type of package again. The problem is, theoretically, they would be able to write their own appropriations bills for fiscal year 2026. And, whether they want to reach back into fiscal year 2025 and claw back some of, money that was appropriated then. It remains to be seen. And you have to remember that this was sort of a product of the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE initiative, and that sort of has fizzled out along with the relationship with President Trump and Elon Musk. So we'll have to see if that's something that the president puts on his priority list over the next 2 or 3 years.
And we started by talking about the effect, according to the Senate Democratic leader, of the rescissions package on fiscal year 2026 spending. How far along are the Republicans in the House and Senate in moving the bills along?
Not far at all. They need to write up a majority, if not all, of the individual spending bills. That process will begin this week in the Senate with a number of markups and hearings on a number of the spending bills. Even if they got those spending bills done, there's still no top line agreement between the 4 corners of leadership of what the top line spending number would be for fiscal year 26. So I mean they're a long way away from real progress here, and that obviously puts us into a situation at the end of September where they may be debating another short-term funding extension for the government to buy themselves some time.
Stephen Newcomb, Axios Senate reporter. Find his articles at axios.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And a reminder that you can follow the Senate live, gavel to gavel, on C-SPAN 2 television and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Washington Today continues in a moment.
In a nation divided, a rare moment of unity. This fall, C-SPAN presents Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. In a town where partisan fighting prevails. One table, two leaders, one goal, to find common ground. This fall, Ceasefire, on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few headlines from CBS News. The Supreme Court on Tuesday lifted a lower court order that blocks sweeping layoffs of federal workers at nearly 24 agencies while a legal battle over President Trump's plans to drastically cut the size of the government moves forward. The High Court's order clears the way for the Trump administration to resume its efforts to reorganize and scale back the federal government, which has been led by the White House's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And the IRS says pastors who endorse political candidates from the pulpit shouldn't have to risk their churches losing their tax-exempt status. The move effectively calls for a carve-out for religious organizations from the rarely used IRS rule called the Johnson Amendment, put in place in 1954 and named after then-Senator Lyndon Johnson in a joint court filing intended to end an ongoing case against the IRS, Tax Collection Agency, and the National Religious Broadcast Association and Evangelical Media Consortium and other plaintiffs have asked a federal court in Texas to stop the government from enforcing the Johnson Amendment against the plaintiffs. That was from the CBS News. Story from the New Republic. President Trump responded to a question about his administration's closure of the Jeffrey Epstein case, something that has enraged his deepest base for days, with dismissiveness and indignation. At the president's televised cabinet meeting on Tuesday, a reporter asked about the administration's recent conclusion that disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and that there was no silver bullet client list, which directly contradicted what multiple senior Trump officials have been saying for months and in some cases years. The reporter also asked about a missing minute in a roughly 11-hour video the Department of Justice released capturing Epstein's final hours in prison the night he died. That was from the New Republic, and here is today's cabinet meeting. You're also going to hear from Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Yeah, sure. Could I just interrupt? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Attorney General Pam Bondi and President Donald Trump at today's cabinet meeting at the White House. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, writing on X, "The American people deserve to know the truth," referencing Epstein, "regardless of who it impacts. There is plenty of evidence and info not pertaining to CSAM victims that DOJ leadership can authorize the FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino to release. The FBI cannot release anything without the Justice Department authorization. The task force and all its members will be asking for that on behalf of the American people. The American people should be free to come to their own conclusions. The truth will always come out one way or another." Congresswoman Luna chairs the task force on the declassification of federal secrets. And from the Hill, Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee called on the Justice Department to release former special counsel Jack Smith's report on the Mar-a-Lago investigation, as well as any of the Epstein files that reference President Trump, accusing Attorney General Pam Bondi of shielding potentially damaging information. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem confirmed today what has been reported at several airports around the country, that Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, officers are no longer requiring air travelers to take off their shoes during security screening. That policy was put in place in 2006 after the so-called shoe bomber Richard Reed tried and failed to detonate explosives hidden in the soles of his sneakers on a flight in 2001 from Paris to Miami. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem spoke at a news conference at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport.
We have some very exciting news to announce that today we have started a new no shoes policy with the Department, the Transportation Security Administration. TSA will no longer require travelers to remove their shoes when they go through our security checkpoints. This is something that I know for quite some time people have talked about and discussed, and we know that when President Trump was elected that he pledged to make life better for all Americans, and that includes those who are travelers going through our busy airports. We want to improve this travel experience, but while maintaining safety standards and making sure that we are keeping people safe as they go to take their vacations, travel for work, or spend time with their families. So we took a hard look at how TSA does its business, how it does its screening processes, and what we do to make people safe, but also provide some hospitality as well.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at a news conference at Reagan Airport. Airways magazine writing about why this is happening. Now, nearly 20 years later, TSA says things have changed. Scanners are smarter, security systems are better, and in some places, taking your shoes off just isn't necessary anymore. The tech can spot what it needs to without making everyone take off their precious sneakers. That was from the Airways magazine article. More on this from Kristi Noem.
What recent changes to security equipment or threats data has offered you the assurance to make this change?
We've gone back and looked at our security processes, looked at the efficacy of everything that we do, every screening process that we have, to see what results it is giving us, what information it is giving us about travelers, and then our technologies, if it's giving us the information we need as far as the screening of individuals, whether it's magnetometers or whether it is processes where they're being identified by a TSO. So all of that has been evaluated to see what is affected, what should stay in place, and what should be removed to streamline the process.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Story from Washington Post. U.S. Department of Agriculture Chief Brooke Rollins announced Tuesday that the U.S. government will move to ban sales of farmland nationwide to Chinese buyers and other foreign adversaries, citing threats to national security and food security. In a joint news conference with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Rollins said the administration would work with state partners and pursue executive actions to halt the purchases. She also announced plans to increase oversight of existing farmland owned by entities from countries including China, Russia, and Iran. That was from the Washington Post. Secretary Rollins spoke at the news conference outside the White House.
American agriculture is not just about feeding our families, but about protecting our nation and standing up to foreign adversaries who are buying our farmland, stealing our research, and creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the very systems that sustain us. Reshoring and nearshoring our food and agriculture supply chain is essential for our nation's security. In coordination with the White House, the Departments of Treasury, Defense, Homeland Security, and Justice, as well as state governors, state agriculture commissioners, local, tribal, and territorial governments, today we announced the USDA's National Farm Security Action Plan. This plan includes 7 key action items, and there's a lot of people here that I want you to hear from, so I'm not going to go one by one, but just very quickly. It's on our website. The press has gotten a preview of it, and we can ask some questions once we finish the main program. But very quickly, and perhaps the most important, the first of the 7 is securing and protecting American farmland ownership, actively engaging at every level of government to take swift legislative and executive action to ban the purchase of American farmland by Chinese nationals and other foreign adversaries, standing on the shoulders of great governors, 3 of whom are standing behind me, who have already been leading the way on this issue, and at the federal government level, working to do everything within our ability, including presidential authorities, to claw back what has already been purchased by China and other foreign adversaries. Additionally, working with the Treasury of the Secretary of the Treasury, along with our Defense Department, on memorandums to ensure that moving forward, there is a much more intentional look at who is buying what in this country and from where they are in the world.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins at a news conference outside the White House. Also there, the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security, plus the governors of Arkansas, Tennessee, and Nebraska, and a couple of U.S. senators and House members, all Republicans. More from the Washington Post article. Chinese investors currently own 265,000 acres of U.S. farmland, according to USDA data, about half of which is tied to a single company, Smithfield Foods, which was acquired in 2013 by WH Group, a Chinese conglomerate led by tycoon Wan Long. That was from the Washington Post. Other parts of this action plan announced by the USDA: enhance agricultural supply chain resilience, protect U.S. nutrition safety net from fraud and foreign exploitation, defend agricultural research and innovation, put America first in every USDA program, safeguard plant and animal health, and protect critical infrastructure. New York Times writes that President Trump stepped up his criticism of President Vladimir Putin of Russia on Tuesday, accusing him of duplicity, a day after saying that Ukraine needed more weapons to defend itself against Russia's invasion. The president said Monday that the U.S. was resuming munition shipments to Ukraine to help it fend off Russia's invasion. Just last week, the White House acknowledged that the administration had paused the delivery of some air defense interceptors and precision-guided bombs and missiles to Ukraine, citing Pentagon concerns that U.S. weapon stockpiles were dwindling. That was from the New York Times. Here's President Trump at today's cabinet meeting at the White House.
Mr. President, you want to send more weapons to Ukraine, as you said last night. Last week, the Pentagon paused some shipments of weapons to Ukraine. Did you approve of that pause?
We want to put defensive weapons because Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. What did you tell me?
I think that's a question for the Pentagon.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, on immigration.
President Trump at the White House cabinet meeting. He also said we get a lot of BS thrown at us by Putin. He did use the word. If you want to know the truth, he's very nice to us all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. From Associated Press, Israel's defense minister has outlined plans to pack hundreds of thousands of Palestinians into a closed zone of the Gaza Strip along the border with Egypt. According to local media reports, it appears to be the latest version of plans by the Israeli government to maintain lasting control over the territory and relocate much of its population of some 2 million. That was from AP. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C. He met with President Trump Monday night, had dinner with him at the White House, and then today on Capitol Hill with House and Senate leaders of both parties, and is again meeting with President Trump tonight. President Trump was asked during the cabinet meeting about the war and chances of a ceasefire. You're also going to hear from U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff.
It's on Gaza with the Prime Minister, and there's reports that you're meeting with Netanyahu again tonight. Is that accurate?
I am. He's going to come over again tonight. We're talking about Gaza. It's mostly Gaza right now. It's He's been very unfairly treated. I think what they've done to him in Israel is very unfair, having to do with this trial. I think, he's a wartime prime minister, had an unbelievable outcome, and I think he's been treated very unfairly. But he's coming over later. We're going to be talking about, I would say, almost exclusively Gaza. We got to get that solved. Gaza is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And he wants to get it solved, and I want to get it solved, and I think the other side wants to get it solved. Steve, could you talk on that, please?
We're in proximity talks now, and we had 4 issues, and now we're down to 1 after 2 days of proximity talks. So we are hopeful that by the end of this week, we will have an agreement that will bring us into a 60-day ceasefire. 10 live hostages will be released, 9 deceased will be released. We're meeting at the president's direction with all the hostage families to let them know. And we think that this will lead to a lasting peace in Gaza.
And you're doing a good job. It's a tough one. A lot of hate, This is called long-term hate. But we think we're going to have it solved pretty soon, hopefully with a real solution, a solution that's going to be holding up.
President Donald Trump and U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, during a cabinet meeting at the White House. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Capitol Hill, after meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson, spoke to reporters.
Now, will you meet President Trump again tonight?
It may be very likely.
Should we expect an announcement regarding the ceasefire and the hostage release?
Well, we're certainly working on it. I can't speak in advance. You need, you need several parties to tango. It's not even 2 here. But we're working on it diligently as we speak. In fact, on the way over here and on the way from here. We're not going to let up. We have a goal. We intend to achieve that goal. We accepted a proposal that came from the mediators. It's a good proposal. It matches Steve Witkoff's original idea, and we think that we've gotten closer to it, and I hope we can cross the line. That is our purpose. But I think the less I speak about it publicly, the more likely that we might get it.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill in between meetings with House and Senate leadership. Another AP story, an Israeli report released Tuesday said that Hamas used sexual violence as a tactical weapon of war in its October 7, 2023 attacks, building on other investigations by international and Israeli rights groups and the United Nations. From the Washington Post, an impostor pretending to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio contacted foreign ministers, a U.S. governor, and a member of Congress by sending them voice and text messages that mimic Rubio's voice and writing style using artificial intelligence-powered software, according to a senior U.S. official and a State Department cable obtained by the Washington Post. U.S. authorities do not know who is behind the string of impersonation attempts, but they believe the culprit was probably attempting to manipulate powerful government officials with the goal of gaining access to information or accounts, according to a cable sent by Rubio's office to State Department employees. That was from the Washington Post article. State Department spokesperson Tammy was questioned about it today at the State Department news conference by NBC reporter Andrea Mitchell.
Well, in your own voice, can you explain how it could happen that some imposter tried to get access via a fake, signal ID of the Secretary of State reaching out to officials, foreign officials, as well as domestic officials? And how could it happen? And can you explain, did they get in and did they get any access?
Well, it's a few things I can say to you here. The State Department, of course, is aware of this incident and is currently monitoring and addressing the matter. The department takes seriously its responsibility to safeguard its information and continuously takes steps to improve the department's cybersecurity posture to prevent future incidents. For security reasons, we do not have any further details to provide at this time. The State Department, of course, when we think about the reports that have occurred, and the details that we would like to provide become problematic, obviously, when it comes to investigations and the nature of the actions that we're taking. So that's what I have for you right now.
Well, can you say anything, can you tell the American people that there was no damage, no violation of security?
Yeah, I will not, whether that's the case or not, go into any of the details. This, of course, is the State Department. It's the United States government. We live in a technological age that we are well enmeshed in, and I'll leave it at that. But when there is something to report, everyone here will hear it first.
Can you say whether it was discovered by state or by another government agency or by an outside
I cannot go into any
provider?
details regarding discovery or the actions that have been or are being taken or will be taken. But it will be something that you will hear.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce, questioned by Andrea Mitchell, reporter for NBC and MSNBC. The Guardian writing about this, the threat of AI impersonators has become increasingly common across government agencies. The State Department cable included details that the actor impersonating Rubio created the account in mid-June and was similar to other activity in May when someone impersonated other senior U.S. government officials. That is likely a reference to the impersonator who pretended to be White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and reached out to her personal contacts and one lawmaker. Reporting from The Guardian. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. We'll send you the stories making headlines in Washington every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.